Welcome back to another World Manager Creative Team podcast. I am your host, Jesse. And along with me, of course, are two of our top instructional designers, Luisa and Anna. How are y'all? And then
Jesse.
Hello. And we're also joined by our creative team leader, Geet. And today we are going to be talking about common mistakes that you can avoid when producing and creative active content. This is a great topic for us to cover because we actually see a lot of different little mistakes. Some are small, some are large, and we're trying to help you avoid some of the more common things that we see when brands start producing content for their active library. So this is a great subject, and to kick us off, Geet is going to give us an overview of how to address this. Geet.
Thank you, Jesse. Thank you for the introduction. As Jesse mentioned, today we are going to talk a little bit about most common mistakes in designing your course slides. And if any of you guys are wondering, why should I care about it? Why it's important to know that? The simple reason is because just having your slides content ready is not enough. The delivery of the content is just as much important. Well, information and content should be presented to your learners that is very easy for their eyes, like easy to find it, and it's not overwhelming for them. It doesn't stress their brain. And also, research has proven that good design, good visual design on slides, they help your learners. Your learners are less distracted. They're focused on the learning. World Manager offers an incredible platform to deliver the content, but also World Manager's Active Editor, it enables you to design these slides that are on brand and some tool options to get good visual design practices and pieces into your course. Now, what are we going to do and what are you exactly going to learn in this podcast? If that's what is your next question, I like to say you're going to learn some insider hacks, some expert tips on designing your course slides. And we have our super creatives here today to show you with exact examples and through slide comparisons on what not to do and what to do. Our super creatives will be presenting these slides to show you three things essentially. Number one is going to be the importance of your slide elements. Number two will be how contrast works and some really quick fixes. Number three is going to be the importance of consistency in design and hierarchy in content and how to get them in content slides. So without further ado, let's get this thing started. And handing this over to Anna.
Thank you, Geet. Happy to be here today. Okay. Well, let's see this welcome slide. There is a plain color background. For welcome slides, I recommend to use a big high quality picture as a background usually, or at least an image that covers a big part of the slide. Please notice how the brand logo is touching the borders of the slide in the corner. And also, notice that there is no padding space there. And the same happens with the title paragraph. That blue rectangle shape should only cover the title, but there is a part of the paragraph over it. It is not recommended to have very long paragraphs in the welcome slides. It's better to leave these slides with short texts. And it's better to keep these long texts or paragraphs for other content slides or introduction slides. Well, in relation with the begin button, I recommend to place it at the bottom, maybe center or at the right bottom, because that's a visual indicator for the learner that they should press there to continue. Okay, here is an example of a clean and good welcome slide design. Please notice how the title is framed by a semi-transparent blue layer. This layer can be created with the help of the shape tool. Please only add just a transparency by the properties panel.
That's
okay.
That's a good explanation, Anna. And I just wanted to point out too that when we all first saw that first slide, I think some people, you look at it right away and you can kind of tell something's wrong, but maybe you don't exactly know. It just looks a little off, and that's a good explanation. Kind of the difference between the second slide you showed, which is a really good example of a welcome slide, and then some of the little bitty things that aren't necessarily, completely wrong, but they are certainly not what we would recommend as best practices. So I just wanted to point out, like that one right there versus this one right there. So I just wanted to point out that, sometimes people can kind of look and see that something's just a little bit off, but they can't quite put their finger on it. So I'm glad that you were able to explain that for us. Thank you.
Thank you, Jesse. Okay, now I'm going to show you a content slide as an example of what mistakes we try to avoid. In this line, for example, the heading text is extremely large. Notice also how there's a very little contrast between the light blue ribbon and the topic title. We can fix it by darkening or lightening the color of the text. Well, here we can see also how the white body text is just over an image, over the background that has an image full of elements. It is also touching the borders of the slide. And this will be fixed by adding a semi-transparent layer shade between the text and the background. There are so many times that we use images in content slides, but there are some things that you want to avoid. One of them is to use images with transparent backgrounds. And that's one of the good practices, because this practice unifies the visual design of the slide. It's also good to find a balance between images and text. In this slide, also we can notice how these buttons are too big. And also keep in mind that when working with clickable areas, you have to be aware that the depth of the clickable area is at the top. I'm gonna close this preview and I'm going to enter to the editor because I would like to show you how does it work. Well, here we have an example of the depth. For example, this button is on top, and the clickable area is last. So what happens is that this image is covering. So when I click in preview, this doesn't work because there is something over the clickable area. So please always keep the depth on top of the clickable areas on top.
Yeah, that's an easy mistake to make, but that's really good advice, because a lot of that stuff, when you're working with multiple layers, multiple images and clickable areas, it's easy for stuff to get lost behind the button itself. So that's a good tip.
Yes, it is. And it should also be noted that on the clickable area, when working with clickable area, the show as a hand cursor option is activated, right? Because if it is not activated, so the learner won't see that this is a clickable area or a button. So we can simply activate it here by the right hand panel. And when we preview it, we see now that this shows the hand cursor over a clickable area. Okay, I'm going to share this one. Okay, so here we can see an example of a visually well achieved slide. And that's what I wanted to share with you today, guys, that there is always a possibility of achieving good visual design in our slides, just applying order and contrast and knowing how to use the pictures and text and transparent layers.
Yeah, that's great. I really appreciate you sharing with that, Anna. And that's a really good example too of basically the slide with the exact same elements and the same content. And one way we've got it just kind of jumbled around and you're just not paying attention to small things like the contrast of text up against the background. And then in the second slide, you showed us that just a little bit more order and kind of paying attention to some of these small details that really can make a real difference when a viewer or a user is going through one of these Activ modules. So really good explanation. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Great. That's great. And another thing that we want to capture is every slide has a purpose. So a welcome slide has some key components like the logo, like the course name, an image background, and a navigation start button. So these are your 4 main elements on your welcome slide. For the content slide, on the other hand, there would be a logo, a main heading, a subheading, an image to go along with the text, along with the content, and the content, of course. So these are the 5 key elements of your content kind of slides. So very well presented, Anna.
Yes, and if they want to learn more about creating the core content slides, if you happen to miss our last episode, you can certainly go back and watch the last session because we gave a great explanation on how to create your 3 main core slides for an Activ presentation. So,
true.
Alrighty, so thank you once again, Anna and Geet, and I think we're going to move on to Luisa. She is also going to share with us some tips and some common mistakes to avoid. So without further ado, Luisa, you want to give us some examples?
I want to talk about color consistency. Oftentimes, colors are not planned on a slide. When this happens, as you can see in this slide, it is not the best visual experience. You can active property panel on the right in the option background. It offers a very helpful feature to add your brand colors. Just by adding your brand hex code and clicking the plus icon, you are able to create your color palette for your entire presentation. In the previous slide, you can notice how the slide was designed from the brand color palette. Now we can talk about the text boxes. Notice how the text font is not consistent on this slide. It would recommend that we use a similar font and find a consistent alignment style. If you have a text box that is aligned to the left, ensure that other text boxes in this slide are used on the same alignment. Okay, we have a very important element. Look at the graphic image used in this slide. This graphic does not align with the branding. This is something that we want to avoid. It is best to have your slide color, font, graphic to be consistent and jump out. What next? We need to talk about the use of logo in the slides. Logos are one key part of the branding and often included in course slide. If you notice on the top ribbon, the logo is smaller and in a different location of this slide from the rest of the slides. It is a good practice to keep the size and position of the logo same for all the slides in a course presentations. The last element that I would like to show you is the button. Notice how the buttons on this slide are so different from each other. These have a different size as well as position. If we compare with the previous slide, the buttons on this slide are consistent in look, size, and position. These buttons are easy to find and use from the users. Let's look at a slide that follows good slide design practices. As you notice on the top of the slide, the logo is consistent with the cursed slides. The graphic and color used are aligned with the brand and the rest of the course's slide. The buttons hold their size and position consistently. The text font is the same and follows similar alignments. You also can see how the text size changed from different text boxes. By having the slide heading and subheading in bigger text and the slide content text in a smaller text, you are showing a hierarchy to the users. This helps the users to read the slide. Is there any content piece you want to highlight? You can do by placing a shape container behind the text boxes. Notice how adding a white shape behind the text box helps us see the text better. By making such good choices, we can create great slides for courses. Thank you very much for your attention. I hope you find it very useful.
Well, thank you, Luisa, for those really good comparisons brought out with the slides. And just to highlight what we learned today is, I think I got to see examples of welcome slides and content slides with all the key elements in those slides. I also find that importance to contrast is so great because with higher contrast between the elements, you're able to see better. And it just helps the learner read the content. Next thing would be importance of consistency. How we can bring consistency with color, with size, with the position of all these slide elements. So you want to retain it to the brand color. You want to make sure that the buttons are the similar size. They are in the same position. The logo is also in the same position across the entire presentation. Finally, with good hierarchy within the content, you're able to get the right focus. So it means that you can plan it very strategically where you want to have the learners look first. Your image is the dominant part in the slide. Yes, a big image. The heading, have the heading size, text size is big. The content could be a smaller size. So you know 1, 2, 3. And that way you can exactly target the focus of your learners. I think that's about it. And it was a fun podcast. Thank you so much.
Yeah, thanks again to everyone here. I really appreciate that. And I know that our users and our viewers are going to certainly be able to take these tips and utilize them in their own active creations because it's a lot of good information. Really good stuff. So thank you very much. That's going to wrap it up for this episode of the World Manager Creative Team podcast. And until the next episode, we will see you. Bye.
Bye.